he was very new in his position as president when the tribunal award came out, and the Philippines, of course, supported it and expressed its willingness to abide by it. But China took a different position, and quite strongly. So with this difference in view, the question was there a way forward? And that was when he designated a special envoy to China. This was the former President Fidel Ramos. And I was part of that mission, the Ramos mission. We conducted the talks in Hong Kong, and this was like the icebreaker. His basic approach was that don't put it in the front and center. Don't let it be an obstacle to the development of relations, but rather to proceed on two tracks, so to speak. So it is on that basis that the President decided to push through with his state visit. And as a result of that, there were at least agreements on 13 agreements on different fields. And now we're in the process of further promoting and improving the relations, The recent pronouncements, regarding fortification of islands and reefs that the Philippines has occupied since the 70s and 80s does not represent a basic change of policy insofar as the Philippines is concerned with respect to China. What it really means is that the Philippines, particularly the Duterte administration, wants to improve the living conditions of the soldiers that are occupying these islands. And what the President has said does not mean we will occupy new or get involved in a conflict with territories that are being occupied by other countries. We'll stay of improving relations with China, but it also means that our position, insofar as what we view as part of our territorial sovereignty, and insofar as trying to improve the conditions of the personnel who are there, the hope is that this can be accomplished without adding any tension, without causing any misunderstanding. I think our hope is that the U.S. will play a constructive role. You see, we are in a region where there is growing strategic competition, between the dominant power that was the U.S. and the rising power that is China, where we do not advocate, war or the use of force, and we would call on all the parties involved to resort to negotiations and dialogue. And most of all, we do not wish that the Philippines will be a battleground between the major powers. Anything is possible, as we've seen over the past 6 months. It's gone from one thing to another. But I think from the recent summit meeting, I think we can see that it's also possible, for both sides, for China and the U.S., to be able to talk and to be able to ease tensions. It won't solve the problems overnight again, but at least it has improved considering to where we were in January or February or December or January. So in that sense, we have to prepare, of course, for the worst. But I think there is room for maneuver, there is room for diplomacy, and there is room for dialogue. It's going to be a complicated course that we will try to navigate. The President described it as to make sure that we proceed from our own national interests. So what we'd like to do is to navigate a course that is friendly towards China and in keeping with the historic, cultural and historic ties with the U.S. We do not wish to be antagonistic to either powers. This is not an easy course to maintain and there will be mid-course corrections as depending on what the situation calls for. It's, in a sense, choosing the path of an independent foreign policy, proceeding from the interests of the Filipino people. Because after all, from our point of view, diplomacy should serve the interests of the people. Of course, in an interdependent world, it's almost impossible to remain independent or fully autonomous. But as much as possible, the outcome we wish to achieve is to maintain good relations, good working relations with all the major powers. Well, President Duterte has, he's a veteran politician, and he was able to achieve he was able to win victory with a convincing margin. I have no doubt that he will be able to navigate this. It's just that we cannot expect, the opposite towards China. However, if you look at the trend line, recently, the most recent survey showed for the first time, China has gone from negative rating to a positive rating. So the point I'm making is that this will take time. I think what is important here is to show through actual reality that a non-confrontational approach, an approach of discussion and dialogue through bilateral consultations, can actually ease the tension and can work to benefit both the Philippines and China. Of course, each country will have to determine it on their own. But in a sense, what the Philippines is doing is very similar to what Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Thailand, Myanmar are doing. In a sense, the Philippines is joining the mainstream of ASEAN. In the past, what we're doing right now is to redress the problem in the past, where we were identified with our traditional ally, almost to the extent that we had a hostile relation with China. We are not giving up our traditional alliance, but we are steering. We're initiating, having degrees of separation, because our foreign policy has to be our own and not that of another country. And because of that, there's a recognition that there may be a divergence with the national interests of the Philippines with other countries, but we try to promote cooperation where there are convergence in the national interests. So we're, in the one hand, starting from our own conditions, but at the same time, the course we have chosen is really in line with what other ASEAN countries, with what the mainstream of ASEAN is doing. It's a matter of preference. As for me, the only thing I can say is that it is now, it's going to be a major power in the world, and it's an ancient civilization. These are ideological biases. They're cultural, ideological, but I think those who think that way will eventually change. I mean, I have my own set of friends. They at least want to experience China. They at least want to eat the genuine Peking duck. And they at least want to see, the cultural wonders, Xi'an, the terracotta warriors, the World Heritage sites. This is where economic development is happening. This is where, the whole region of which China is part of is where the future of the world economy actually lies. If they really are very much against it, let them be. Let them be. History will will, leave them behind. We have to recognize, and it's often not uh, not understood, you know, Chinese historical heritage, the pride of the Chinese people in its history, and how that has shaped the Chinese mindset, and the fact that China now is is in a sense, rising, and it's a resurgent China. It's recovering. It's trying to recover its the position that it used to have in the region, in the world. But China, being more economically developed, now wants to play a greater role in regional and world affairs. And this is a reality that we have to accept and to recognize, because China is a neighbor of the Philippines. So for me, it's very important to understand the Chinese mindset, because in doing so, one will be able to appreciate, how China acts and behaves right now, and also how to deal with China. China, I think, also has to understand the Filipino people. It has a different social system, a different political system. It's also proud of its history and proud of its heritage as a nation. So it's only on the basis of equality and mutual benefit that I think we'll be able to achieve peace and progress and common prosperity.